It's Bizarro World on Seinfeld here, as we talk about the Bizarro Jerry, which has a character, Kevin, from the previous episode, The Soulmate, in which him and Elaine struck up a relationship because they both didn't want to have kids. Even though Kevin got a vasectomy, now he's getting his vasectomy reversed, but now they're still here. And the common trend in this episode was, I think we're better just being friends. But of course, a lot of shenanigans happen. This is a really good episode. I really like this episode for sure. David Mendel mentioned how there's a lot of writers who came on later in the series. Most of them were already fans of the series. So a lot of ideas that were pitched were based off of jokes among jokes from previous episodes. Like based off material from before that just became this. And this idea of having, bizarro worlds of, two opposites colliding was actually a neat idea. And, of course, the one person, the only female of the cast, Elaine, stuck in the middle of the situation. Of course, everyone else seems distant, too. George not only calling Jerry when he needs something. Kramer, unknowingly, while going to the bathroom at a random law firm, lands an unpaid job that he didn't even work at. So, just some crazy shenanigans, but I think this is a good episode. I think definitely one of the best in Season 8, at least. So the episode starts off, Jerry, George, and Kramer, because I was confused by this. I didn't understand this. Was in a law firm called Brand / I can't remember what it was. But I understand why they were there first. But apparently they were there just because Kramer had to go to the bathroom. He didn't want to go to the bathroom at the store. And I guess George was bragging about how this was one of the best bathrooms ever. While they were waiting, though, George sees this really beautiful woman behind the counter who's the receptionist. And basically Jerry pitches the idea of what if you used Susan's death as like a sob story to, snag a date with her. George chickens out and says he can't do it. Later, though, Elaine, when they left, Kramer came out of the bathroom and ran to one of the workers there, and he was mentioning talking about the copying machine. And then they're being all called into a meeting, and the guy looks at Kramer and goes, "Oh, let's go," thinking that Kramer works there. Well, Kramer, like other times, especially in this season 8 finale when he goes up on the stage to accept an award at the Tonys, Kramer goes into the meeting like he actually works there. Jerry and George, meanwhile, they went out and they met Elaine for lunch. Elaine mentions to Jerry how he thinks she would get along with her friend Jillian. Gives him a photo of her and has her history and stuff written on the back. I smile, was in a serious relationship from 1992 to 1995. Favorite president is James K. Polk. And of course, George even thought she was incredibly beautiful also. So then he thought, what if he goes back to that law firm and not just tells that receptionist a story about Susan's death, but what if he uses that picture of Jillian as Susan? A beautiful woman like that, he basically said he'd be introduced to a big forbidden city he would never be allowed to be in. So sure enough, he goes back. And actually, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. Before that, though, Elaine went out with Kevin to Reggie's and mentions how she just wants to be friends. And Kevin was for that. He would like to be friends. He would actually like to go to this one museum that Jerry didn't want to go to with her. Which, of course, Elaine mentions that. And then they do the scene. Okay, I missed that scene. My bad. So, George goes back to the law firm and starts saying he was looking for a Mr. Art Van Delay. And then when he says, let me make sure I have the right information, looks to his wallet and just purposely shoots out the picture of Jillian. And then the lady picks up and basically was just like, who is this? And then George tells the story and she said, oh, she's beautiful. I'm Amanda. And then basically he gets a date with Amanda. And she takes him to this big fancy place with all these models. And George again uses the photo to snag, a dance with some of these models. And it worked. George was in a world he never thought he would be in, basically. I don't know if we like better that or, the idea of him dating Marissa Tomei. I don't know which one was better, but, he seemed to be enjoying it. Kramer, meanwhile, though, was really, digging into this fake job of his he had. Kramer, of course, Kramer, of course, then was not really spending time with Jerry. Jerry was getting jealous that Kramer wasn't really spending much time with him. He missed him. And then Jerry went out on a date with Jillian, but when he shook her hand, realized she had man hands. Like big, firm man hands. And outside of all the beauty she had, Jerry just couldn't get those man hands. It just bothered him. Those man hands just bothered the crap out of him. He wasn't sure if he can go through with it. And then, of course, Elaine asked him if she could help him with some stuff the next day. Well, Jerry didn't show up, and Elaine had to ask Kevin to come help. And then, of course, she starts saying how, Kevin's the complete opposite of Jerry. He's reliable, he's this, he's that. He is the Bizarro one. The Bizarro Jerry, I basically referring him to. Of course, Kramer came in after work. He was even up like early in that morning in Jerry's apartment making breakfast, and basically, and again, even though he doesn't actually work there, acting like he's been working there for how long. And of course, Kramer came home and he's exhausted, complaining that work's tough for him. He's like, it's my busy time of the year, and he's like, you've only been working there for 2 days, basically, and whatnot. Of course, then that gets more distant. Then the problem came. Well, then of course Jerry went on another date with Jillian, and he was just so turned off. She was breaking the bread with her manly hands. She opened up his beer. She even tried to scratch some on his face, and then she even the way she broke up her lobster. He was just like, oh god, he couldn't take it. He absolutely just couldn't take it anymore. So he said he was planning on breaking it off. Of course, as he's telling Kramer that, Kramer not paying attention, and then Jerry just flips out on him. Elaine, meanwhile, meets Kevin at Reggie's, the Bizarro monks, and she meets 2 of Kevin's friends, Gene and a guy they like to call Feldman. Gene, of course, I think was the best cast Bizarro character, as he was Bizarro George. He looked exactly like George. It was funny. I mean, Kevin, had Jerry resemblance, but and Feldman had the Kramer resemblance, but Gene, I think, was the best one. Which Gene actually apparently is Larry David's middle name. But of course, she gets to know them, and they're just exact opposites of the guy she normally hangs around. They're nice, they're smart. Gene picked up the tab, and then Kevin and Feldman are going to the library just to read, which is not something Jerry would do. Complete opposite. And of course, Elaine starts to enjoy hanging out with them more than her other friends. Jerry, of course, meanwhile, was dealing with Kramer, and then he has Jillian over saying he wants to just be friends. As she's washing her hands in the bathroom, though, she's taking a while. George had an accident where he accidentally left his blow dryer on, while he was on a phone call. I think he was telling Amanda he just wanted to be friends, and he accidentally ruins the picture of Jillian. So he calls Jerry in a hurry, saying, "I need another picture of man hands." And then, as Jerry was trying to sneak it out of her purse, he's like, "Got it," but then Jillian grabs his wrist, and of course, from her firm grip, he hurt her wrist. She hurt his wrist. And then finally, Kramer came home. He had these reports he had to do. He's like, this Leland guy is really working me hard. But then he realized that Jerry was frustrated and everything from everything else going on. He goes, you know what? Screw his reports until another time. We're going out tonight. And then they call George. And then there's this scene where Jerry, George, and Kramer were walking down the street. And then they see Elaine. They're like, Elaine, hi. And all of a sudden we hear, Elaine. You look over to her right. And from the other way, there come the Bizarro World with Kevin, Gene, and Feldman. So they had this shot where Elaine's standing in the middle, and then at the same time, on one side you see Jerry, George, and Kramer. On the other side we see Kevin, Gene, and Feldman just walking in at the same time. It was like a perfectly done shot. And then Elaine tells Bizarro World, hang on one second. And she's like, what do you guys want? And then, the only favor they really needed was George was trying to get another photo of Jillian. Because if he doesn't have it, he's not going to be able to get back into that private club. The private club he was getting into. And of course, Jerry made the deal. George and Jerry made the deal that if he would have gotten that photo, then he would have taken him there too. But of course, Jerry couldn't get it, and he says how Manhand's almost ripped his hand out of his socket. And Kramer also was having a little bit signs of an ulcer. But then Elaine looks over and sees that Kevin, Gene, and Feldman are donating money to a homeless guy. And then Elaine goes, I gotta go. Well, George's like, well, wait, can I come with you? And then Elaine goes, sorry, but we already have a George. And she walks away. So then George does try to get into to that private club without Amanda, of course, and he just cuts a photo of a model out of a magazine, and he tried using that instead for his image of Susan, but then the lady he was talking to ended up being the lady in the picture. She's like, that's me in a magazine from this and this, and then George got kicked out. Kramer, meanwhile, of course, did get fired from his Kramer did get fired from his unpaid job at the law firm, and then George takes Jerry back to that club where it's back to being like the meatpacking industry place it was, and Jerry's like, yeah, thanks for nothing. Of course, as they walk out, buried underneath the breadcrumbs was the last photo from the magazine that George had used the night before. Elaine, meanwhile, of course, basically made it clear that she'd rather spend time with Kevin, Gene, and Feldman. She even had a scene where it kind of showed that she was looking more towards the future, how she was tired of going back and forth to his apartment. Basically saying that, she thought all her normal friends were flawed, and now she wants to go see these guys that are the exact opposite she likes better. Well, she goes to the apartment, to Kevin's apartment, who has the door locked, unlike Jerry always has his unlocked. Gene was there reading, and the apartment, which is also apartment number 5A, was basically a mirrored image of Jerry's apartment. Pretty much everything, just about everything was almost the same, for the most part. Feldman came over, of course, we knocks on the door. Who is it? And the door's locked. It's Feldman. And they're all and then Kevin's confused. From across the hall. Oh, okay. Every time the two scenes they showed Kevin's apartment, it's Feldman. From across the hall. Oh, like, who else do you know named Feldman? And of course, there's a FedEx guy named Vargas, who they're good friends with, apparently. He's supposed to basically be the Bizarro Newman, which is funny. But then, of course, Elaine starts doing some of her things, and it was starting to bother the Bizarro World. And then, of course, whenever Kevin gets them 4 tickets to this one show, Elaine does her "get out" and pushes Kevin, and Kevin gets hurt. And basically, the guys were just like turned off by Elaine. So Elaine gets kicked out of that group. So yeah, Jerry loses man hands. Kramer loses his unpaid job. George lucks out at getting back into that club, which goes back to being the meatpacking industry thing. And Jerry hurts his wrist from man hands. But he gets his friends back, coming back to him at the end of the episode, I guess. That's a plus. Any trivia here? Well, obviously, Jillian's hands are not from a woman, of course. The hands of man hands was James Record. He was personally casted by Jerry Seinfeld, who remembered Record from acting classes as the James Best Theater Center. In Kevin's apartment, just like Jerry has a Superman statue. Kevin has a Bizarro Superman statue in his apartment, just to the right of the apartment door. And of course, in the scene at the end of the episode where they have a little scene with just Kevin, Gene, and Feldman hanging out at Kevin's apartment, they had played the Seinfeld theme song backwards, I believe it was, for that song, of course. The idea of man hands came from real life, from writer David Mandel, who had a storyline on his girlfriend Rebecca ending their long distance relationship. But Rebecca refers to her hands as farm hands and is very self-conscious of her farm hands, as she says. Of course, the apartment numbers for Jerry and Kramer, Jerry and Kevin were the same. One difference, of course, then in Jerry's apartment was he had the green bike next to his bathroom door, while Kevin had a unicycle hanging on his bathroom door on the opposite side. Again, Bizarro George, whose name was Gene, that's also Larry David's middle name, Gene. The name Feldman actually came from David Mandel, who in 1975 worked on Saturday Night Live the week that Bob Saget, rest in peace, was hosting. And Mandel looked like one of Saget's friends and would therefore call him Feldman instead of Mandel. And then when Mandel was struggling to come up with a name for Bizarro Kramer, he then used Saget's nickname and called him Feldman instead. See here, and then, and of course, there's a one scene where Kramer's getting ready to hit the work, and he's taking part in there's like a work sequence for him. They're playing the song "Morning Train 9 to 5," which was also played in the season 9 opener when George was working at Play Now. And then, of course, that's basically it. But, yep, that's the Bizarro Jerry. Again, we meet the Bizarro world. Kramer just works for the heck of it on an unpaid job, thanks to him going to the bathroom. George was introduced to a forbidden city he'd never been into before. And then Jerry got hurt by man hands. Poor Jerry. But that's my thoughts on the Bizarro world. We're going to do a little dancing in the next episode. Why is that? You'll see why. I'll catch you next. What the hell does that mean? You saying you want a piece of me? We'll talk about all that in the next episode. The Little Kicks. What are your thoughts, guys, on the Bizarro Jerry episode? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure to always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I am checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.